So back in late 2024, there was this massive, multi-million-dollar water brand just suddenly vanished from Croatian supermarket shelves.
Yeah, completely disappeared.
Right, like you'd go to the store looking for Kala spring water or Kalnik mineral water, and the space was just empty. The whole corporate apparatus had completely shut down.
The marketing, the distribution, all of it.
Exactly. The bottling plant's gone. But, okay, here is the really wild part to me.
Yeah.
The factory that actually built that product, this colossal 250 million year old tectonic layer cake, it's still just sitting out there.
Doing exactly what it's always done.
Yes. Pumping out thousands of gallons of perfectly mineralized product every single day. And it's completely indifferent to the fact that nobody's paying for it anymore.
It really is the ultimate lesson in the difference between human economies and geological ones.
Oh, 100%.
We tend to think of a mountain as as a backdrop, like a static piece of geography.
Just a big pile of rocks.
Right, a big pile of rocks. But when you look closely, you realize it's actually an industrial scale machine. I mean, it is actively filtering water. It's regulating atmospheric temperature. It's engineering soil composition.
It's serving as a medieval fortress.
Yes. That too. It's a highly active participant in its own ongoing existence.
Okay, let's unpack this, because today we're taking you on a deep dive to that exact factory. We're looking at Kalnik Mountain, which is located in northwestern Croatia.
And we have an incredible stack of sources to guide us today.
We really do. On one hand, we have this deeply comprehensive ecological and historical assessment of the region. And on the other, we have a highly immediate boots-on-the-ground travel blog post.
Which was actually published today, June 9th, 2026.
Right, by a hiker named Luka Jagor. And, if you read a standard travel guide, you just get the bullet points, right? Like some nice hiking, some medieval ruins.
The standard tourist stuff.
Yeah. But synthesizing these sources reveals this wildly complex living ecosystem.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really map the internal logic of Kalnik. We aren't just going to look at the surface features. We are going to deconstruct the mountain.
Start from the bottom up.
Exactly. We'll begin deep underground, tracing those ancient tectonic collisions that forged its architecture. Then we'll track the movement of water through those fractured rocks.
Up into the forest canopy, right?
Right, into this highly engineered deciduous forest. And then we will examine the specific biological mechanisms of the wildlife that rely on those microclimates.
And obviously we have to talk about the people.
We do. We will analyze the human timeline, tracing how everyone from a 13th century king dodging a Mongol invasion to, a modern-day hiker, how all of them have interacted with this massive natural machine.
So let's start at the foundation. Literally. We have to rewind to the Mesozoic era.
Yeah.
Now, if you were hovering over the geographic coordinates of Kalnik back then, you wouldn't be looking at a rocky peak.
No, not at all. You'd be staring at water.
Right, the warm, shallow waters of the Tethys Ocean. The sources emphasize that the building blocks of this mountain weren't born in a fire,
Yeah.
They were deposited by water.
And the mechanism of that deposition is so crucial to understand. Over millions of years, you have countless generations of microscopic marine organisms.
Just living and dying in this ocean.
Living, dying, and sinking to the bottom. And their shells and skeletons were composed primarily of calcium carbonate.
Which is basically chalk, right?
Essentially, yeah. And as these unimaginably thick layers of organic debris accumulated, the sheer weight of the ocean water plus the newer sediment piling on top, it compressed the lower layers.
Just squishing it all together.
Right. And this pressure triggers a chemical and physical lithification process. It fuses that organic matter into solid limestone and marl.
Wow.
We're also seeing the deposition of sand and silt, forming these vast beds of sandstone. So the mountain is, at its core, an ancient oceanic graveyard.
Because we have this massive, flat, hardened seabed. But Kalnik today has a peak, Vranac, sitting at 643 meters above sea level.
It's a significant elevation.
Yeah. And I was trying to conceptualize the sheer physical force required to lift an ocean floor into the sky. Based on the geological data here, the best analogy I can think of is a giant 250-million-year-old layer cake.
I like that. A layer cake.
Right. You've got your limestone layer, your marl layer, your sandstone layer. Then you place a giant hand on either side of that cake and just relentlessly push them together.
And the cake can't stay flat.
Exactly. It buckles. It folds over itself. It fractures. Some sections thrust upward into the air, while others get crushed downward deep into the crust.
The structural dynamics of that cake analogy are spot on, though we should probably identify what those giant hands actually are.
Oh, sure. tectonic plates.
Yeah, we are looking at the tectonic convergence of the African and Eurasian plates, and this was a slow-motion collision spanning millions of years.
Not just a sudden crash.
No, incredibly slow. But as the African plate drove northward, the rock didn't just bend smoothly. I mean, the limestone under certain pressures can exhibit some plasticity.
Like it gets bendy.
A little bit, yeah. But ultimately, the crust fractured violently. This is orogenesis, mountain building.
So it's snapping and breaking.
Exactly. Kalnik sits right in this crumpled transitional zone where the Pannonian Basin meets the Dinaric mountain system. So the rock was thrust upward, snapped, and even inverted in some places.
The sources note it wasn't just marine rock getting crushed together either. There was evidence of ancient volcanic activity. They mentioned igneous rocks mixed into the geology.
Which adds a whole new layer of complexity.
Right, so while our layer cake was getting crushed, magma from deep within the earth was exploiting those tectonic fractures. It was either breaching the surface or cooling just below it.
Injecting this incredibly hard volcanic stone directly into the softer sedimentary layers.
Which has to mess with the structure, right?
Oh, drastically. The presence of those igneous intrusions altered the mountain's future structural integrity forever. When you have an environment composed of wildly different rock densities.
With soft marl next to hard magma.
Yeah, soft marl next to brittle limestone, next to dense igneous rock. You set the exact stage for what we call differential erosion.
Okay, differential erosion, which perfectly explains the most iconic visual feature of Kalnik, right? The seven teeth, or Sedamzuba kalnica.
Yes, those are breathtaking.
They're these massive, jagged, rocky cliffs jutting out of the forested slopes. They honestly look like the exposed spine of some ancient beast.
That's a great way to describe them.
But how exactly do those specific rock formations survive? Well, everything else around them washes away. Like, why are the teeth still there?
Well, it comes down to the mechanics of weathering, particularly during the brutal climate shifts of the Quaternary period's ice ages.
Oh, so we're talking about ice.
Exactly. Now, even though massive continental glaciers didn't physically bulldoze over Kalnik, the ambient global temperatures plummeted, and this created intense freeze-thaw cycles.
Yeah.
When precipitation falls on this chaotic jumble of rock, it pulls in those tectonic fractures. And water, unlike most substances, it actually expands by about 9% when it freezes.
Right. It acts like a microscopic wedge.
Precisely. It's a wedge. As temperatures drop below freezing at night, that water turns to ice, and it expands with immense hydraulic pressure. It physically shatters the surrounding stone.
Wow, just blows it apart from the inside.
Yeah, and then when it thaws during the day, the water seeps deeper into the newly widened crack.
Ready to freeze and shatter again the next night.
Exactly. Over thousands of years, this process pulverizes the softer marls and sandstones, and then those just wash away by rain and snowmelt.
But the hard rocks stay.
Right. The hardest limestones and those igneous intrusions we talked about, they resist this process much longer. So the seven teeth are essentially the stubborn geological remnants, the rock that just refused to break.
That is so cool. But, you know, those same deep tectonic fractures that eventually carved out the seven teeth, they didn't just create dramatic scenery.
No, they did something much more functional.
Right. They fundamentally altered how the mountain handles water. Because you'd think rain hitting a mountain would just, run off the slopes into the valleys.
Like water off a roof.
Yeah, exactly. But the sources describe the forest soils acting like a massive, highly porous sponge.
And what's fascinating here is the chemical relationship between the rainwater and the geology.
Because the rain isn't just pure water.
Right. As rain falls through the atmosphere, it picks up carbon dioxide. So it becomes a very weak carbonic acid.
Acid rain, naturally occurring acid rain.
Yes, naturally slightly acidic. And when this acidic water infiltrates the forest soil and hits the underlying limestone, a chemical reaction occurs. The acid slowly dissolves the calcium carbonate in the rock.
Literally eating away at the mountain.
Exactly. Physically widening those tectonic fractures into a vast network of internal capillaries, sinkholes, and subterranean aquifers. This is what we call a classic karst hydrological system.
Okay, so I was reading through the source documents on this, and it struck me. Is the entire mountain basically functioning as a giant geological Brita filter?
A Brita filter. That's an interesting way to look at it.
Because the water goes in at the top, right? It filters through all these layers of rock, and then it pools at the bottom.
The architecture is similar, sure, but the fundamental mechanism is actually the exact opposite.
Wait, really? How is it the opposite?
Well, think about a Brita filter. It uses activated carbon to strip impurities and minerals out of the water, right? It leaves it relatively neutral.
Oh, true. It takes the gross stuff out.
Right. But Kalnik's internal plumbing system is actively adding things into the water. As the rainwater percolates through the limestone and sandstone, which can take months or even years, by the way.
Well, years.
Oh, yeah, years. It undergoes immense natural purification, yes, but it also dissolves and absorbs a highly specific profile of minerals: calcium, magnesium, bicarbonates.
So it's flavoring the water, basically.
Exactly. By the time that water hits an impermeable layer of rock and is forced back out to the surface as a crystal clear spring, it has been chemically transformed.
And that highly specific chemical transformation is what birthed the commercial empire we talked about at the very beginning of the deep dive.
The bottled water.
Yes. The story of Kayla spring water and Kalnitska mineral water is entirely predicated on this exact geological process. For decades, human industry tapped into these protected springs.
They realized how valuable that mineral profile was.
They laid sanitary pipelines, they built modern bottling facilities, and they basically turned the tectonic output of Kalnik into a recognizable, heavily marketed Croatian brand.
And it was a highly synergistic operation for a long time. Atlantic Grupa, the company managing the brands, heavily marketed the water's natural purity and its ideal mineral composition.
Because it was genuinely good water.
They weren't lying. That composition was the direct result of that Mesozoic layer cake we talked about. The company essentially commodified deep time. And furthermore, the commercial value of the water inherently protected the mountain.
Oh, because they had to keep the source clean.
Exactly. To maintain the purity of the springs, the massive forested catchment area above them had to remain pristine. Industrial logging or heavy agriculture up there would have completely contaminated the aquifers.
But then, Luka Jagor's travel blog post hits us with the modern reality check.
The 2024 shutdown.
Yeah. He notes that the production and sale of both Kala and Kalnitska were permanently discontinued at the end of 2024. Atlantic Grupa completely shut down the Padovac plant near Krzeshi.
They just looked at the logistics.
Right. The heavy competition in the bottled water market, the rising costs of packaging and distribution, and they just pulled the plug. The commercial brand simply could not survive the modern economic climate.
Which raises a really important question about value. In our human economic framework, the water suddenly lost its value because the profit margins evaporated.
The spreadsheets didn't make sense anymore.
Right. The human machinery, the plastic bottles, the delivery trucks, the marketing campaigns, all of that proved to be fragile and temporary.
But the mountain doesn't read quarterly earnings reports.
Exactly. The permanent cessation of the Kala brand had absolutely zero impact on the mountain's hydrology.
It's still raining.
The karst aquifers are still filling. The springs are still flowing with perfectly mineralized water. The geological factory continues to operate at peak capacity.
So if millions of liters of pristine water are no longer being routed into plastic bottles and shipped across the country, where is it going?
It's fueling the local ecosystem.
Yes. The sources refer to Kalnik as a green island of biodiversity. It's this elevated oasis rising above the heavily cultivated agricultural plains of northwestern Croatia.
And to really understand how that island functions, we have to look at the vegetation.
Let's talk about the trees.
Well, elevation plays a critical role here. Because Kalnik tops out at 643 meters, it lacks the extreme hostile environments of an alpine zone.
So no snowy, barren peaks.
Right. You won't find the stunted, wind-battered conifers of Velebit or Biokovo here. Kalnik is entirely dominated by deciduous broadleaf forests. It is an absolute masterclass in microclimate adaptation.
And the sources map this out beautifully. If you go up to the higher elevations, the dominant species is the European beech.
Fagus sylvatica.
Right. And these beech forests aren't just passively sitting there, right? They're actively engineering their own environment.
Oh, heavily engineering.
The canopy they create in the summer is astonishingly dense. The overlapping leaves capture almost all the available sunlight.
Which completely changes the temperature below.
Yes. The sources point out that this dense shade acts like a natural HVAC system. Summer temperatures up in the beech forest hover between a very comfortable 22 and 30 degrees Celsius.
It completely buffers the intense heat of the surrounding lowland.
Exactly. It's like walking into an air-conditioned room.
And the mechanism behind that HVAC effect is evapotranspiration.
Evapotranspiration. Break that down for me.
Well, a mature European beech tree absorbs hundreds of liters of water from the soil water provided by our karst plumbing system, by the way, and it releases it into the air through microscopic pores in its leaves.
Like the tree is sweating.
Kind of like sweating. This phase change of water from liquid to vapor physically absorbs heat from the surrounding air. So the forest is literally air conditioning itself.
That is incredible.
Furthermore, the root systems of these massive trees aggressively bind the thin mountain soils, preventing the very erosion that the freeze-thaw cycles are constantly trying to accelerate.
Wow, so the trees are literally holding the mountain together.
They are. But as you move lower down the mountain where the elevation drops and the microclimate becomes warmer and a bit drier, the beech trees step back.
You start seeing different species.
Right. You start seeing massive stands of sessile oak and common hornbeam. And woven throughout all of these zones, you have a scattering of field maples, European ash, and linden trees.
That botanical diversity is basically the ecosystem's insurance policy, isn't it?
Absolutely. A monoculture is inherently fragile. A single pathogen or a specific climate anomaly can wipe out an entire system if everything is the same.
Like if a beetle comes through that only eats beech trees.
Exactly. But Kalnik's mosaic of oak, hornbeam, ash, and maple ensures structural resilience. Different tree species produce different types of leaf litter, which decompose at varied rates.
So the dirt itself is more complex.
Yes. It creates a highly complex soil chemistry that supports a much wider array of microorganisms and fungi.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
The timing of the seasons creates this dramatic temporary shift in how the forest operates.
The spring window.
Yes, because those dominant European beech trees, they do not leaf out the second the temperatures start to rise. There is a distinct biological lag in early spring.
It's a very strategic delay.
Right. The air is warming up, the snow is melted, but the canopy overhead is still completely bare.
And that brief period is known as the spring ephemeral window. From an evolutionary standpoint, it is an absolute race against time for the plants on the forest floor.
The sources describe an absolute explosion of wildflowers taking advantage of this gap. Sunlight pours unobstructed straight down to the soil, triggering all these dormant bulbs and rhizomes.
It's a massive blooming event.
You get a carpet of wood anemones, primroses, violets, and wild garlic.
Yeah, we immerse in them.
Yes, wild garlic. And these plants have to shoot up, unfold their leaves, photosynthesize enough energy to survive the next year, flower, and reproduce.
All before the lights go out.
Exactly. All before the massive beech trees above them finally open their leaves and plunge the forest floor back into deep shade.
It's a highly synchronized biochemical rush. And what adds another layer of complexity is how the rugged geology shapes where these plants can even survive.
Right. The rocks create little neighborhoods.
Exactly. Highly diverse micro-neighborhoods. The fractured limestone creates these distinct zones. You might have a sheer rocky outcropping facing south that absorbs massive amounts of solar radiation.
So super hot and dry.
Right, creating a hot, hyper-dry environment perfect for drought-resistant plants. Yet, literally 10 meters away, in a shaded geological depression where the rock folds inward, moisture gathers.
A completely different world.
A completely damp, cool hollow, perfectly suited for delicate ferns and moisture-loving orchids. The physical violence of the mountain's formation is directly responsible for its botanical diversity today.
And long before modern pharmacology, humans recognized the immense utility of that botanical mosaic. The historical texts in our sources note that the local populations heavily utilized Kalnik as a natural pharmacy.
They were very tuned into it.
They weren't just wandering aimlessly. They knew exactly which microclimates produced specific medicinal plants. They were foraging St. John's wort, hawthorn, elderflower, and wild thyme.
And the utilization of these plants wasn't just folklore. It was based on highly effective biochemical compounds.
Like real medicine.
Real medicine. St. John's wort, for instance, contains hyperricin and hyperforin. These are compounds with documented neurological effects that humans have used for centuries to treat mood disorders and inflammation.
Wow. And what about the wild thyme?
Wild thyme contains thymol, which is a powerful natural antiseptic. The local populations were tapping into the defensive chemicals these plants evolved to survive the mountain's unique environment.
So if we zoom out and look at the whole picture so far, we have a dynamically cooled, humidity-controlled forest, constantly watered by an ancient, naturally mineralized karst plumbing system packed with highly specialized plants ranging from sun-baked antiseptics to shade-loving ephemerals.
It's quite a setup.
Essentially, Kalnik is an unparalleled luxury resort for wildlife,
Mm.
which perfectly explains why it is heavily integrated into the Natura 2000 protected network.
Absolutely. The animal community here is a testament to the health of those underlying mechanisms we've discussed. You can really trace the flow of energy straight up the trophic levels.
Let's follow that energy. At the base, you have an incredible density of insect life,
Right.
Butterflies, bumblebees, dragonflies, all drawn by that explosive spring bloom and the varied leaf litter. They act as the primary engines of pollination and waste breakdown.
And sitting just above them on the food web are the amphibians.
Oh, the sources heavily highlight the presence of the fire salamander.
Salamandra. The fire salamander is perhaps the ultimate bioindicator for Kalnik.
A bioindicator, meaning it tells us how healthy the environment is.
Exactly. Because amphibians breathe partially through their skin, making their dermal layers incredibly permeable. And consequently, they are highly susceptible to environmental toxins.
So if the water is bad, they absorb it immediately.
Right. Furthermore, the fire salamander requires highly oxygenated, pristine, slow-moving water to lay its larvae.
So they are directly reliant on those naturally filtered springs that used to feed the bottled water industry.
Precisely. If the aquifers get polluted, or if the water chemistry changes drastically, the salamanders are the first to die off.
They're like the canary in the coal mine, but for karst hydrology.
Yes. So the fact that the fire salamander populations here are robust is empirical proof that the karst filtration system is still functioning flawlessly.
And that the trees are doing their job too.
Right. The forest canopy is preventing agricultural runoff from the surrounding lowlands from contaminating the aquifers.
Okay, moving up to the larger mammals, the environment becomes a stage for significant physical manipulation. We have roe deer utilizing the forest edges, grazing at dawn and dusk. But the real landscape engineers mentioned in the sources are the wild boars.
Oh, the boars. Their ecological role goes far beyond simple foraging.
What are they doing?
Well, when wild boars root through the forest floor searching for acorns, tubers, and grubs, they are essentially performing industrial-scale rototilling.
Rototilling, like literally plowing the earth.
Yes. This aggressive turning of the earth aerates the compacted soil, allowing oxygen and water to penetrate deeper into the root systems of the trees.
So they're helping the trees grow.
They are. And crucially, they also unearth and consume various subterranean fungi.
Mushrooms and stuff.
Exactly. As the boars move across the mountain and excrete waste, they disperse the spores of highly beneficial mycorrhizal fungi across vast distances.
Oh, wow. So they're planting fungus everywhere they go.
Effectively inoculating new areas of the forest and strengthening the symbiotic root networks of the entire ecosystem.
That is wild. But to keep those boars, deer, and the massive rodent populations in check, the mountain relies on its predators. You have the adaptable red foxes and the elusive nocturnal European badgers.
But we also have to look up. The sources point out the immense importance of the aerial predators.
The raptors.
Yes, and this is where our geological deep time specifically, the towering limestone cliffs of the 17th comes crashing back into the narrative.
Oh, I love when it all connects.
The architectural reality of the 17th offers an unparalleled tactical advantage for raptors. We see thriving populations of common buzzards, tawny owls, and Eurasian sparrowhawks utilizing these cliffs.
It's all about physics and elevation, right?
It is entirely about aerodynamics and defensibility. Nesting high on those sheer vertical rock faces makes the eggs and fledglings functionally immune to ground-based predators like foxes or badgers.
Because a badger can't climb a sheer cliff.
Exactly. But more importantly, those massive stone faces absorb solar radiation during the day.
Like giant solar panels.
Yes. As the rock heats up, it warms the air immediately adjacent to it, creating powerful thermal updrafts. A common buzzard can just step off a cliff, catch that thermal, and spiral high into the sky with almost zero energy expenditure.
They just ride the elevator up.
Right, and from that elevated vantage point, they can visually scan not just the forest canopy, but the expansive agricultural fields stretching out below the mountain. The cliffs give them a commanding operational range that just wouldn't be possible in a purely flat landscape.
Well, the raptors weren't the only ones to look at those massive, sun-baked, highly defensible limestone cliffs and realize their immense strategic value.
Yeah.
Humans did the exact same calculation.
We usually do.
Right, which kicks off a centuries-long narrative of strategic utilization of this specific geological formation.
When we look at the human timeline on Kalnik, starting back in the Stone Age, it is driven entirely by the mountain's underlying mechanisms.
It's the perfect spot.
It really is. If you are a prehistoric community trying to survive, Kalnik offers the perfect trifecta. First, you have the elevation of the Dinaric Pannonian Fold, granting you massive sightlines to detect incoming threats.
Like the buzzards using it to hunt.
Exactly the same principle. Second, you have the dense beech and oak forests providing limitless fuel, building materials, and game.
And
Third, and most importantly, you have the constant, reliable output of the karst springs.
Water. So it's basically a natural citadel. It's no surprise that by the Bronze and Iron Ages, the sources show humans were building fortified hilltop settlements here. They needed to control and monitor the vital trade routes winding through the valleys below.
The Romans eventually moved into the broader region, bringing paved roads and agricultural infrastructure to the plains, but Kalnik itself remained this elevated, forested stronghold.
But the true synthesis of human engineering and geological architecture on Kalnik occurred in the 13th century, right? With the construction of the Old Town Kalnik Fortress.
Yes. This wasn't just a castle built on a hill. It was physically integrated into the fractured geology of the mountain.
They used the rocks as walls.
They did. The stonemasons used the natural sheer faces of the rock as structural walls, essentially completing the defenses that the tectonic collision had started 250 million years earlier. The Kingdom of Hungary and Croatia heavily fortified this site to anchor their southern defenses.
And this brings us to one of the most vivid and, frankly, entertaining historical accounts in all of our sources, the legend of King Bela IV.
Ah, yes. 1241.
The year is 1241. The Mongol Empire is expanding violently westward into Europe. The Mongol cavalry was this terrifying, highly mobile military force that was absolutely devastating the open plain.
Unstoppable on flat ground.
Right. And King Bela IV is desperately fleeing this onslaught, and the historical record suggests he sought refuge right here in the Old Town Kalnik Fortress.
And honestly, the decision to retreat to Kalnik was a masterstroke of geographical warfare.
Why is that?
Well, the Mongol army's primary tactical advantage was their light cavalry. They relied on speed, flanking maneuvers, and wide open space for their archers.
But you can't run a cavalry charge up a 600-meter karst mountain covered in a dense, mature beech forest.
Exactly the point. The steep inclines, the jagged limestone outcroppings, and the impenetrable root systems completely negated the Mongol tactic.
The mountain fought for them.
The mountain itself acted as the primary defensive mechanism. It slowed the invaders to a crawl and forced them into punishing vertical engagements against fortified stone walls.
Okay, the military logic is incredibly sound. But I have to ask you about the specific local legend attached to this siege.
I knew we'd get to the pastries.
We have to talk about the pastries. Because surviving a siege requires more than just high walls. You need logistics. You need calories. And the local story claims that the villagers from the surrounding valleys kept the king alive by secretly scaling the cliffs at night and smuggling in food.
Specifically, traditional plum pastries.
Yes, mutually. Okay, looking at this objectively, is there any historical validity to the idea of a medieval king surviving a Mongol siege on a diet of smuggled baked goods? Or is this just the greatest localized PR campaign for traditional pastry in European history?
Well, the specifics of the pastry are almost certainly romanticized folklore.
Oh, man.
I mean, when analyzing medieval siege logistics, the reality of moving enough caloric density up a sheer cliff face at night to sustain an entire royal retinue, it is highly suspect.
A lot of pastries.
A lot of pastries. However, the core truth embedded in that legend is undeniable. A fortress cut off from its surrounding agricultural base will inevitably starve.
Right, you can't eat limestone.
Exactly. The legend of the plum pastry survives because it highlights a fundamental reality. The local population utilized their intimate knowledge of the mountain's hidden geological fissures and forest trails to maintain a supply line.
A supply line the Mongols couldn't find.
Right. The Mongol forces, unfamiliar with the terrain, could neither find nor sever it. So the mountain shielded the king, but the local ecosystem fed him.
A king eating black market plum pastries while hiding inside a tectonic fracture is just such a great image. But eventually the Mongol threat receded, the empires shifted. The sources indicate that by the 18th and 19th centuries, the socio-political climate had dramatically stabilized.
The fortress was slowly abandoned to the elements.
Right. The local populations transitioned from viewing the mountain as a defensive necessity to utilizing it for sustainable forestry and agriculture.
And that psychological shift in how humans perceive Kalnik is profound. For thousands of years, the mountain was a tool for survival, a place to hide or a place to forage.
But then it changed.
As the existential threats diminished in the late 19th century, a completely new paradigm emerged. People began to look at those massive limestone cliffs and dense forests not as a place to hide, but as a place to explore.
Just for fun.
Exactly. We see the birth of modern mountaineering in Croatia.
In the late 1800s and early 1900s, the Croatian Mountaineering Association began formally charting and marking trails across Kalnik. Suddenly, you have people from urban centers like Zagreb, Kruševci, and Varaždin traveling to the mountain explicitly for recreation, exercise, and scientific curiosity.
And to facilitate this new influx of visitors, they started constructing infrastructure, specifically mountain huts.
Right. The construction of the Kalnik Mountain Hut Planinarski Dom Kalnik, right near the ruins of the medieval fortress, was a watershed moment.
It fundamentally changed the human relationship with the space. It centralized access and fostered a culture of organized, responsible interaction with the ecosystem.
It wasn't just a place to sleep.
No, it provided shelter, yes, but it also became an educational hub where hikers shared trail information and ecological observations.
Which brings us perfectly to our most recent piece of source material. We've talked about tectonic collisions, complex hydrology, medieval sieges, and the dawn of organized mountaineering. And now, we crash right into the mundane reality of today, June 9th, 2026.
Luca's blog post.
Yes. We have this highly detailed blog post from a hiker named Luca J. Gore. And Luca is incredibly transparent about the fact that his interaction with this magnificent ancient ecosystem was heavily dictated by terrible planning.
Luca's account is a brilliant ethnographic snapshot. It grounds all of our deep time analysis in the realities of modern ecotourism.
It really does. Because Luca writes that he originally wanted to go for a swim. He tried to hit the thermal baths in Varaždin, but they are closed for renovations.
Strike one.
Right. Then he pivots to the Varaždin city swimming area on the Drava River, but that isn't open until Friday. Strike two.
So he heads to the mountain.
Defeated, he decides to drive up to Kalnik, specifically aiming for that historic mountain that we just talked about to get a coffee and a meal. But Luca is making this trip on a Tuesday.
And as he discovers upon arrival, the Kalnik Mountain Hut is only open on weekends.
Strike three, I just can't get over the irony here. In 1241, the Mongol Empire has the entire mountain surrounded, and the locals somehow manage a clandestine midnight delivery of fresh plum pastries to a starving king.
But in 2026...
In 2026...
It is a frustrating experience for him, for sure, but it highlights the logistical realities of modern conservation infrastructure.
How so?
Well, facilities like the Mountain Hut are heavily reliant on volunteer labor from local hiking societies. The economics of keeping a remote facility fully staffed and provisioned 7 days a week are simply unfeasible, so they optimize for peak weekend traffic.
That makes sense. But even his blog post remains highly valuable because he embedded raw HTML photos of his hike.
Yes. Despite the closed hut, he provides us with empirical, visual evidence of the mountain's mechanisms operating perfectly on this specific day.
And his descriptions of those photos are incredibly evocative. He talks about standing on a sunlit path winding through a vibrantly green forest. He notes the tall, straight-trunked trees filtering the sunlight into soft, glowing rays.
What he is documenting there is the mature European beech canopy we discussed earlier. He is standing inside that natural HVAC system, visually capturing the evapotranspiration process as the light hits the moisture-dense air.
He also documents the physical intersections of human infrastructure and the wild ecosystem. One of his photos captures a curving, modern paved road stretching through the flat agricultural fields, aiming straight for the mountain range.
The approach.
Yeah, and another shows an ancient gravel road, likely dating back to the forestry operations of the 19th century, cutting through incredibly dense green vegetation leading up to a partially cleared hillside under a cloudy sky.
Those images prove that Kalnik is not a pristine, untouched wilderness in a glass box. It is a highly managed mosaic.
It's all mixed together.
Exactly. The paved roads, the gravel paths, the medieval ruins, the closed mountain hut, they all exist harmoniously alongside the fire salamanders, the wild boars, and the spring ephemerals.
So even on a Tuesday,
you still experience the entirety of the Natura 2000 protected environment functioning exactly as designed.
So after synthesizing all of this, the ancient geology, the biology, the history, and the highly specific realities of the Tuesday hike, What does this all mean for you listening right now?
It's a lot to take in.
It is. We started by looking at a mountain as a static postcard, but we've uncovered a massively interconnected, continuously running factory. A violent tectonic crash 250 million years ago built a towering layer cake of fractured rock.
That rock became a chemical filter, absorbing rain and pumping out mineralized springs.
Exactly. Those springs birthed a massive commercial water brand that eventually failed, but the water kept flowing anyway. That water feeds a dynamically cooled forest of beech and oak, which supports a complex food web of mycorrhizal spreading wild boars and cliff-diving raptors.
And those same cliffs provided the architectural foundations for a fortress that shielded a king from an empire,
which eventually evolved into a recreational destination for modern hikers.
The synthesis of these sources really demands a fundamental shift in perspective. A relatively moderate mountain lacking massive glaciers or extreme alpine zones is nonetheless a profound ledger of Earth's interconnected systems.
The geology dictates everything else.
It does. The geology dictates the hydrology dictates the botany dictates the zoology. And human history, from medieval military strategy to modern commercial bottling, is entirely subservient to those underlying natural mechanisms.
It makes you realize that geography is never truly fixed. It is always an active process. And that leaves me with a lingering thought, a question for you to mull over today, based on that massive shift in 2024.
The end of the water brand.
Right. For decades, millions of people interacted with Kalnik Mountain by drinking its naturally filtered water from plastic bottles purchased in brightly lit supermarkets. The Kala brand was their direct physical connection to the Mesozoic geology we just spent this whole time deconstructing.
They were drinking the mountain.
Yes. But now that the corporate machinery shut down and that product is no longer sold, what happens to our societal relationship with that specific natural mechanism? When a mountain stops being a commercial product and simply goes back to being a mountain, do we lose our understanding of its value?
Or does it force us to see it differently?
Exactly. Does it finally force us to appreciate the ecosystem for exactly what it is, a massive, ancient, living machine that owes us absolutely nothing? Think about that next time you go for a hike. Until next time, keep diving deep.